Hello, and welcome to Churchy Chats with a Church Girl. I'm Alicia. If this is your first time here, I am the owner and creator of A Church Girl, which is a lifestyle brand and a clothing line that seeks to inspire and uplift everyone we have the privilege of connecting with. As always, I am excited about tonight's episode, and I'm excited to have some special ladies returning. And just before we get them in, make sure you share this broadcast. Tag your friends, tag your family, tell them come on in the room and join the conversation. Okay, let's get our guests in. Welcome back to Churchy Chats, Felicia and AJ.
Hi.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming back. I appreciate it. I am looking forward to a fun night of hot topics and learning more about both of you in our interview portions. But first, Felicia, say hello to Churchy Chats.
Well, hello. Thank you again for having me back on. I always love being a part of the conversation, and I love the intro song. Every time I watch, I'm like, yes, and a little pep in my step. So thank you for having me back on, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. Alice, AJ, talk to the people.
Hi, everyone. And again, thank you, Alicia, for having me back. I'm
Of
excited to be
course.
here.
We are going to jump right into our hot topics for the evening. So, if you all have seen anything in the news recently about the former president and his social media issues, I guess we'll call it, after the January 6th situation, he was banned from, social media platforms, which, in my personal opinion, it probably should have happened before that, but that's none of my business. So then it came up, I guess, almost like a hearing or, a decision to be made about him and social media last week. And I believe it was Facebook and Instagram, well, owned by the same people there now. Instagram is now owned by Facebook, but they upheld their decision to keep him away. And he started his own little thing. And I mean, we know how he is. But what do you all think about the whole situation, about him being banned, about the decision being upheld, and then now him going to try to do his own social thing?
So I actually didn't know that they had upheld the decision. I'm not up on my current events, but I mean, good for them. I can see maybe how there might be some backlash from that. People always have a problem with every decision. So, but from my personal opinion, I think he was promoting or encouraging, um, violence and everything that went on at the Capitol. So,
Mm-hmm.
and Facebook and Instagram, they are private companies, so they should have a say in how people are able to use their platform. And if he wants to go ahead and start his own website, go ahead. We have the capability to do that. At the end of the day, he is, a businessman, and he's going to try to stay relevant however he can. So we can't say, oh, he shouldn't have a website, right? That's like saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we shouldn't have our platforms, or we
Right.
shouldn't be on Churchy Chat. So go ahead, do you have your website, but as far as regulating his speech and how it on other platforms, I think it is a good thing that they did take a stand just for the good of the general public. So
Mm-hmm. AJ, what are your thoughts? What do you think
I
about this?
100% agree. They are private companies. They ban people or put people in these little, they don't call it timeouts, but where,
It's
they
jail.
can't be active. They go to Facebook jail or Instagram
Yes.
jail for violating Facebook and Instagram policies. And he's not, anybody to where he should be removed from that, especially considering what he incited at the Capitol. So Um, yeah, I think it's just the way it needs to be. And I agree that it probably should have happened long before everything happened in January. But it is what it is. And of course, he's going to find a platform and find a way to spew his little ignorance and stuff to the public and to the people that still listen to him. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And what I thought was interesting, I didn't read the whole article. I don't know if even clicked on it, but there was like a headline that said, you know, the activity on this, I mean, the best thing they could come up with for what it is akin to is like a blog, right? So, of course, I wasn't going to check it out, but they're saying that the response to it is not at all what he thought. And it makes you wonder, like, where are all these people who were running after you and supporting you and, you know, preaching these crazy things and ideologies? Y'all know what I'm trying to say. But where's your support now? You know? And I don't know if people were supporting him because he was in power. And now it's like, you can't do anything for me, so I'm done with you. But I thought it was very interesting that, people just weren't all that excited about. I mean, not that I thought they would be like that, but I did think that his group, his supporters would support him. So I find that very interesting.
Um, I still like I'm in Texas, y'all. So like
Oh,
I
yeah.
still encounter my fair share of Trump supporters on a regular. So I wouldn't say that it's not there, but I think after they hot tailed it to the Capitol and started seeing the consequences of their actions in January, um, they're a little bit more hesitant to be as vocal. So I still see rallies. Like I was passing
Really?
Saturday and there were people out that were Trump supporters. Like, I think I was going to an outlet mall or something and
Rallying
they were
for
on the
what?
corner. I don't know. I guess I saw this thing the other day where this lady was saying that he's still the president. He's just gonna, I forgot what she said. Like people have these really crazy, like crazy theories about what's gonna happen. The military is really in power. Biden's not in power for real. They're just letting him think he's in power and all of this stuff. So they're still out there. And yeah.
And you
But
know what?
Yeah.
And I'm
I,
gonna
I
let
think
you go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, I think now that they know that if they like participate in some of the foolishness that goes on by being one of his supporters, that they can actually see consequences. So they're a little bit more hesitant right now.
Yeah, and Felicia, I'm gonna let you chime in. What I think is so interesting about that is if current President Biden had lost and and I don't want to say we, but his supporters were having rallies and saying that he's the actual president and not the person who was elected, oh, we would just be all kind of crazy and all, you know what I mean? So, I mean, politics are hypocritical anyway. People flip flop and all of that stuff. But I just think that's totally ridiculous. Felicia, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think his supporters are definitely still there. I just think they're more strategic in how they're showing their support. They're not as public per se. And I think there are some people who were blindly following him, and not a large number, but some people who are kind of like, okay, he's not really after our interests, or this isn't beneficial for me to be supporting him in this way. But his supporters are definitely still out there. They're just being more strategic about how they support, and the media is just not. The media plays a big part in what we see too. The media just
Yes.
doesn't show as much, probably because he's not the president anymore, or it's not beneficial to them as businesses. So I think that's what's going on. They're still there though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we live in the South. I mean, well, I live in the South, and AJ lives in the South. Felicia, you're in the DMV area, right?
Well, I will be, but yeah.
Okay. So the thing about living in New Orleans that's tricky is New Orleans is blue, but that's it.
Yeah.
Everywhere surrounding us is red. We are a red state. So I don't like the idea of people going back in their holes, hiding their true feelings and their true support. I would rather you be honest. I mean, we already know what it is, but when you act like one thing and it's really something else, just be honest. If you're racist, then I mean, say that. you know and I think a lot of the issues with racism and black people get blamed for calling it out. What doesn't look like racism to other people, we're being dramatic, or we're playing the race card and all of that stuff. But the truth of the matter is, we know how to spot it because we've experienced it, and we know what passive aggressive racism looks like. So I hope whatever's going on, people get their lives together. But, there's a such thing as free speech. You have the right to peacefully protest. So if you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. We leave it at that. So I think this was last week, um, a teen and her mom are facing jail time for rigging a homecoming election. So when I first saw this, I was like, come on, y'all. That's a little tough. But when I read the article, the mom had access somehow to records in like a computer system, that span the school system, and that is how they cheated. So that added a real deal crime. But even for the mom, maybe. But do you all think that that's a little harsh for the teen? Like jail?
So,
Go ahead.
as an educator in the South who has
Right.
taught at a juvenile detention center,
Mm-hmm.
at first I was like, yeah, this sounds like much. The crimes are felony crimes. But
Yeah.
I've seen black kids locked up, black and brown kids locked
Mm-hmm.
up for way less.
Yes.
I had a
That's true.
9-year-old who had been in jail for months for, like, he was dared to pull the fire alarm at school. He didn't know that was
Nine?
a crime. Yeah, he
Wow.
didn't know that was a crime. I had another kid who, his friends dared him to touch a girl on the behind, like run by and touch her on the behind. He was
Mm-hmm.
in there as a sex offender. Same
Wow.
age, around 9. Yes.
Well,
So they lock up our kids for far less. So y'all hacking stuff, they could have done something even more serious and crucial
Mm-hmm.
than, rig the homecoming election. So I don't have a whole lot of sympathy here.
Lock them up and throw away the key.
Do what you got to do.
I get it. Felicia, what's your opinion on this?
yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I don't study the law, so I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
if it fits what the law says is a felony, then you have to face the consequence of it.
Right.
And when I thought about it, I did kind of think about, okay, if that's what the consequence for that is, let it be a standard. Like, don't let
Mm-hmm.
the black and brown people, have to go to jail for lesser. And then other people are getting away with larger crimes, right?
Sure.
So whatever, I don't really have an opinion about if it's too harsh. It's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like I just want it to be an equal standard for what's happening in general. So if this were a black or brown person, okay, if that's the crime, if that's the consequence, then you got to face it. But let it also be for somebody who's not black or brown, right? So
Right.
I think my thing is just let it be the same standard all around. If that's what you're calling a felony, cool. But let everybody have to face that same consequence.
Yeah. And let me ask you all this. There was that scandal with Lori. I can't think of her last name, but
And
Aunt
Becky, I was
Becky.
just thinking that.
Yes. That was that whole scandal. And her daughters well, I guess they weren't technically, I don't know if they were 18 or like 17, but my question to you all is I know a lot of times as parents, you know, they will do whatever it takes to get their children where they want them to be. My question is if the child is innocent, and I'm using quotes because um, I've never lived a life that my parents did things for me that I was completely unaware of that were illegal. You know what I'm saying? So I can't speak to that. But it's kind of hard to believe sometimes that if you didn't take your ACT or SAT, you know you didn't take that. Like, at what point, or or let me just say it like this, at what point is the child held responsible for some of what has happened? I mean, do we base that on them saying, well, I didn't know, so that's on them? Or are we to believe that they're not completely ignorant of what's going on?
That's tough because that's the exact same situation that I thought about. I was thinking about it from a different lens, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that's hard because immediately, like everybody involved said that their kids didn't know, and
Right.
took the fall for the kids because they knew they had the money to get them out of the situation or whatever. Said they didn't know,
Right.
but that's kind of hard. Like you said, like we didn't grow up in that life, so.
Right.
But it is hard to imagine that you're of age to where you're knowledgeable. Like when it was time for me to go to school, my parents didn't fill out not one thing for me.
Mine either.
They didn't like. I told them how much I needed to take SATs, and went, did what I needed to do on my own. I had to figure it
Same.
out. So had my parents done something like that, I would have known because
Right.
of how involved I was in that process. Now, I do have like I know of people that they were helped a little bit more than I was. Like a little bit more spoiled when it came to like they got help with their college applications, and their parents stayed on them about did you fill this out and all of that. I was the
Right.
one that wanted to go to school, so I had to do all of the things. Um, but it's hard to think that in this day and age that these 17, 18-year-old kids have no idea that parents are rigging stuff in their favor. Especially when you know what kind of grades you're getting at school. You know what you're making on those practice tests if
You
you're
ain't
taking
played
them.
no sports,
Right,
and now all of a sudden you're a star athlete. Come on.
right, right. And so that's hard to believe. But I was also thinking about the fact that like they got the wealthy people, like well-known celebrities who were involved, got like very little time. And I think about this
Right.
mom, this black mom. I can't think of what city she was in, but she used her dad's address to send her kids to
Yes,
school, and she
I
went to
remember
jail
that.
just because she wanted her babies to be able to go to a better school. Not a private school. They weren't receiving any tuition or anything like that. She
Right.
just put them in at her dad's address so they could go to a better public school than the one that they were zoned to. And she had to do jail time for it. So it gets back to like that whole double standard, you know, to where I
Absolutely.
can't feel sorry for them when they get caught up because we do less and we're held to a completely different standard than they are.
That's absolutely true. Felicia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think in those situations where the kids are privileged, I don't think they're totally ignorant of what's going on. I think they understand that they have privilege, but I don't think they always know to what extent their parents are going to get them the things that they're getting. So, I mean, I think it's a mix of both. They know that they're privileged, their parents take care of things, but they might not necessarily know the details of how. And it's hard, like, how do you determine what they really know?
That's true.
So that, I mean, I think that's hard. But even from just when I, was looking at the story about the jail time for the homecoming, I'm like, as a mother, not even just as an administrator, but as a mother, like, why would you even put your child at risk in
Why?
that way? I mean, and this was for a homecoming. This wasn't
Right.
even, for something a little bit more major. But why would you put
Right.
your child at risk for that? Like, is it even worth it? So, I mean, for me, that just makes me question her mental stability, which is a different topic. But it's, I mean, it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. I think I watch too many shows anyway, and that kind of go behind the scenes of these
Yeah.
privileged lives. So I'm like, I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, or for me, it speaks to the importance in the eyes of the child of being homecoming queen. Like, what does that mean to you? What did you express at home that made your mom want to say, I'll commit a crime for you to be homecoming queen? Like, I don't care what my child said to me. I would be like, okay, baby, we're going to go the old fashioned way. We're going to do, the posters. We're going to pass out candy. We're going to do whatever we have to do. But my mind would never even consider committing
Right.
a crime. But it makes you wonder, like, Mom, is this something that you wanted and didn't get? Like, is it your child's self-esteem that you're trying to salvage through a high school homecoming election? And while I know that it may have big impacts on people, once you've been out of school for all of about 6 months, you realize that high school really wasn't that big of a deal. Like, the things that we experience in high school are usually coming of age. So at the time, yes, it's very important to the teenager, to the student. I understand that. Been there, done that. But once you get past it, you realize how minor some of the other things were. Like, homecoming queen is not something people are going to ask you at 40 or at 25 or to get a job, or, it means nothing in the big grand scheme of things. So I think as parents, it's our responsibility to help our children to understand that their value and their worth is not placed in somebody else's hands. And maybe, mom felt like I can make her feel better, or I don't know. It just seems weird because I'm not breaking the law for you to win homecoming court. Now, I'm not saying I'm above it for my child. However, it's not going to be for something frivolous, you
Homecoming.
know?
Homecoming.
No, it
Yeah.
has to be bigger than homecoming for me to even think about it. It has to be bigger. But I am excited because this is our first show that we are actually having a hot topic portion, and then we are interviewing both of our guests. So I'm excited to get to the first interview. After this commercial break, we're going to be interviewing Felicia. So please make sure you stay tuned, share this broadcast, and come on back because she has some good stuff to share. We'll be right back.
Churchy Chats is now airing on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all platforms.
Welcome back to Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. We are here with Miss Felicia Henry, and she has this whole huge brand and empire that she's building. So the first thing I want to ask you, or to have you to do, is to tell us a little bit about what you do, how you've developed, your business kind of over time, because even since I've been knowing you, it has pivoted a little bit. So if you can just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you have going on?
Sure. So I received that you called it an empire.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, so basically, what I have pivoted. The owner of PLH Consulting, and we really focus on helping entrepreneurs whose business is going from a solo operation to a staffed operation. We provide the systems for them. So we help them with the solo to CEO transition. And this
Mm-hmm.
is a niche that is something that we recently pivoted to. Honestly, when I first started my business, when was it? Maybe 2016. I had quit my job and I had no clue what I was going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't recommend people doing that. I didn't have a plan. And there were so many things I was just trying to figure out. Um, just behind the scenes, I was doing a lot of administrative work. And
Mm-hmm.
then I started working in other businesses, doing admin, virtual administration work. And so even for ministries, even before I had quit my job, I had been doing this for like 10 or so years. And just over time, all of my experience has just kind of culminated into this whole idea of this solo to CEO transition, where
Mm-hmm.
I've been behind the scenes in businesses and I've seen how founders and entrepreneurs, they start their business with so much passion, but then when it's time for their business to grow, when it's time for their business to scale, there's a lot of challenges that they're facing, primarily because they don't have a lot of or the proper systems in place. And so that's really what we do at PLH Consulting, helping them get those systems in place so they can have a smoother transition. Not that it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be an easy transition, just because going into the role of CEO is just a challenge in and of itself. But if having those systems does help. So that's what we do.
And I didn't really think about it until I started to see your post and stuff like that. We're so quick to say, if we own our own business, I'm the CEO, but we don't really think about what that looks like. We say we're the CEO because it's our business, and that's really it. But talk to us, what's the difference between a solopreneur and a CEO?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We do throw around the term CEO a lot because we are the business owner. But in order for you to be a CEO, literally CEO means Chief Executive Officer. So
Mm-hmm.
that means there has to be other people within the organization. Working alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's not the case. So, a solopreneur is someone who is basically operating their business by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing the work in their business, they're doing the work on their business. And many times that's how people start. They have an idea, they have a passion, they're good at something. And so they just start a business and they are providing the service, but they're also the person that's, handling their books. They're doing their graphics in Canva. They are
Yes,
the administrator. They're doing
that
all
is
the
me. That is I.
they're doing
That is
all
me.
the things. And let me just say, neither one is better than the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to decide what lane you want to be in, but just understanding there is a difference and deciding and choosing what lane you're going to be in and operating in that lane uh, excellently. So that's what the solopreneur is. You're basically doing everything by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
CEO is when you actually have a team of people and you are the chief decision maker. And so you
Mm-hmm.
are not actually doing all of the work in the business. You are more so focused on the growth of the business. You are focused on what's going to generate revenue for the business. You're focused on the
Mm-hmm.
vision, the goals, making sure we're hitting those targets. You're not, actually always providing the service. So that's really what the difference is.
And tell me this, and I know this is probably something that, happens in a consultation. So y'all take notes because we're digging in just a little bit, but y'all have to pay for the real deal. But my question is, how does a business owner know when it's time to make the shift? And is it a shift that will happen in every business, or do some businesses remain where it's just the solopreneur? solopreneur situation, or do all businesses have the um, potential to move from solo to CEO?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think every business does have the potential, but again, you have to decide what lane you want to be in. Some people want to stay solopreneurs, and that's perfectly fine. My business now, um, I primarily do the work. I'll contract out certain pieces, but I don't have a consistent team, and that's by choice. Now, another business that I'm going to start next year, it's going to be totally different, right? So it depends on what your vision is for the business. I mean, every business does have the capacity or the potential, let me say, to go from that solo to CEO transition. I think if you desire to go through that transition and move into that role of CEO, you'll start to know when you get tired of doing everything in your business by
Yes.
yourself. You start to get overwhelmed with having to do all the work. You can't keep up with all of the work. You're starting to see the business suffer because you're trying to do everything. Things are falling through the cracks. You are missing out on opportunities. You're leaving money on the table. It's beginning to interfere with your personal life. I don't believe that your business should be your life. You should be able to have a life outside of your business.
Amen.
So people start seeing those things, and then sometimes it's the fact that business just is growing, and you can't keep up with everything by yourself, or you just might be in a place where you're stuck and you need more hands to help you to get to the next level. So those are just some of the ways you can tell. Like you'll know, and most of the time it's just this feeling of I can't, or I don't want to continue to do this by myself.
So when a business owner says all the things that you just said, I'm overwhelmed, it's pouring over into my personal life, I just can't do everything, but I don't have the resources or funds, in a more blatant term, um, to hire out. What do we do? What would that business owner do if they need to kind of start making that shift, but they just can't afford to do it? What are some options or ways that you can kind of slowly step into that, even if your bank account is not huge yet?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. And I think the sooner that you start, even if you are starting as a solopreneur, you're in your solopreneur phase right now. I think the best thing to do is to start with your processes and your systems, um, because once you have to start bringing on a team, you're going to need to have that in place so the team can operate and function properly. And a lot of times, what happens, people hire before they have their processes and systems in place, and that just creates more chaos. So, wherever you're at right now is a good time to start looking at your processes and going like foundationally from the beginning, like looking at your organizational chart, understanding what your mission and your vision and your values are, because those things are going to be important down the line when it's time for you to hire. And then literally looking at your processes, the different parts of your business, and understanding how they operate. So if you were to not be the person doing them in your business, or let's say, God forbid, you were out of commission for a week, how would somebody know how to operate your business, right? So
That's good.
I have 5 areas that I always suggest people to look at when it comes to their processes and their systems: your marketing, your sales, client experience, your finances, and your human resources. And so it's literally just taking the time. That's like the biggest part, is setting aside the time to think through, okay, step by step, how does this part of my business operate? And then documenting it. And then if you're not in a place yet to be able to hire staff, then you can focus on looking at what parts of your process can you automate. Automation is
A lifesaver.
amazing. Yes. So start with automation, and then there's ways that you can still build a team without, hiring per se. You can always try to get interns or something like that. So there's different things that you can do, but you definitely want to start going back to the basics, looking at your your processes and your systems.
And that's excellent advice. I'll tell you all, Felicia is actually the reason why I schedule my post the way that I do. Here's the deal. I used to do social media for a company in like 2011, and I used Hootsuite, right? It was just what was available, but it wasn't like a complete situation. Like you still had to, I don't know if this was Hootsuite. It may have been later, Graham, but I know whatever the system was, it wasn't a completely be done with it as it related to one social media outlet. So there was still something to do, when you got to the actual posting. So when I got ready to start Churchy Chats and posting on social on a regular, because I was not doing that, I was like, okay, I'll post at this time. And I tried to kind of prepare them, but she posted something about Facebook Creator Suite. And let me just tell y'all, that changed my life because I didn't know it was there, right? And it's something that's free, that's right under your fingertips, and it posted to Instagram. I didn't have to get, like a reminder that said it's time to post. And I still have to press a button, which if I'm not in a place where I can necessarily, my mind may be, or I may be doing something. My mind may be in a million different places, and I've missed my notification to post, right? And it's nothing more aggravating than taking the time to do something and it still doesn't happen the way that you want it to happen. So listen, y'all, sis knows what she is talking about. If you are at a point in your business that you feel like you need to make the shift, you need to contact her. If you don't think it's time for the shift, contact her for systems and putting things in order. If you haven't started your business yet, this is really the perfect time to contact her because you can start off the right way and you won't have to backtrack and fix, and it's not all bad, but being alone in entrepreneurship is hard. It's just not easy. And everybody says, quit your job, work for you. Yeah, maybe. But, that's not necessarily all rainbows all the time. It's usually pretty tough, but it's worth it and it's rewarding if you feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing. So, Felicia, before we let you go, tell us what services you provide, how we can contact you, and tell us about your podcast too. Tell us about that.
Oh, okay. So I'll tell about the podcast first.
Okay.
So I have a totally separate brand from PLH Consulting called Seek God Slay Goals. And we help millennial women to enhance their spiritual, economic, emotional, and physical health. Primarily right now it's through our podcast. And so we are in the middle of season 2. We just interviewed some amazing faith-filled women. And Alicia has been on our podcast in
Yes,
season
thank you for
1.
having me.
So definitely check us out. You can find us on all of the podcast platforms or our website, seekgodslaygoals.com. We're really just trying to tell the stories of different women so that you can be inspired and encouraged in your own journey. So that's the podcast. As far as what we have coming up or how you can connect with me for PLH Consulting, we are actually launching the Solo to CEO Bootcamp, which I'm really excited about. It's a 6-week boot camp where we're going to literally guide you through the process of getting your processes and your systems in place to help you transition into your role of CEO. So we're going to focus on the CEO mindset, all of your processes and your systems for those 5 areas that I mentioned previously. Automation, implementation, and then also some team building. So if you want more information about that, you can go to solo to CEO, CEO bootcamp.com, or you can just connect with me on social media. I am Felicia L. Henry everywhere on social media.
Thank you so much, Felicia, for being on tonight. Thank you for sharing that information. Like I said, you have been valuable to me with just your post and, of course, your support. And I love what you're doing with Seek God, Slay Goals, and also with PLH Consulting. It's really amazing. And I wish you nothing but the best and much success in the future.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for your support.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna have you back. I haven't said this yet, but this is our third to last episode of the season. I've decided to break it up in seasons. And the reason why I'm saying this with Felicia on here is because she actually helped me with that too. And she didn't even know. Um, Last year, started Churchy Chats in May. And I had only planned to do like 8 episodes. It was like season one. But I really didn't have a whole lot of plans for how it was going to go. But it just kept growing and things kept happening. And I was like, I'll keep going. So that turned into like 32 episodes. So that was not going to work this time around, but I did want to figure out how to do seasons and how to just make it make sense. So I think Felicia posted something, and I was like, you know what, girl? That's a good idea. So I'm going to have a season from March to May, and then we're going to pick right on up in September to November. So I'm excited about being able to grow and develop the the business, the show, everything that goes into it in kind of that downtime. Um, because we all need to take some time and just develop and grow our situations. And sometimes we feel like we can't do that because we have to keep going. We have to keep, but I think sometimes taking a little time away and coming back better and new is always good. So thank you, Felicia, for that.
Absolutely. I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much. And of course, you will be back on Churchy Chats, and I appreciate you being here tonight. Listen, y'all, we will be right back with AJ's interview. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. We are back with AJ, Alice Glenn. Let me say it like she has it written. She is my sister. She is my sister in PK hood as well. Her parents are pastors, and she was at our church for a little while, and she has quite a testimony and quite a story to tell. And I wanted to give her the opportunity to do that on Churchy Chats. But before we even get into it, I want to say thank you for even being willing to share, these types of personal details and stuff like that. I know it's not always easy to do, but I do believe that there is always something for someone when we share our testimonies. So AJ has actually experienced the loss of a child and a divorce. So I just want AJ, however you want to tell us about those experiences, feel free.
Okay. And they kind of intertwine in there. I we married, I guess what you would say, relatively quickly. I think we were engaged after 4, maybe 6 months of being together and dating, and then married in just a little over a year. We were married. I got pregnant very quickly. Did not think so. I had some women's health issues that I thought would either prevent me from having a child altogether or would make it really hard. There was excitement because everything was new and all of that. But a few months into this pregnancy, I realized I might be kind of in this thing a little bit by myself.
Oh, wow.
But I kept going because, of course, I didn't. And most people don't in general get married to get a divorce, especially when you
Sure.
are in a home where your parents have, all you know is your parents being together and all of that. But I realized some things that I should have kind of noticed and peeped out before, and that I possibly should have waited. But I'm in it now, so I'm there. I have my baby healthy, all of that. He's almost 8 pounds. You know, just the pregnancy was a little rough in that I experienced morning sickness the entire time.
Oh.
But other than that, I mean, everything was healthy, normal, healthy delivery. My mom was there. She was there for a few weeks. And then when she got ready to go, I cried. I started getting sick. And she's like, "What's wrong?" I said, "I just don't think he's going to help me." Speaking of my ex husband. And she asked me if I wanted to come home, come back to Texas with her because we were in New Orleans at the time. And I was like, no, I'm gonna figure it out. It's gonna be all right. And I continued to kind of like have that throughout the course of the marriage. Meanwhile, we're going through everything that you go through in that first year with the little baby, and the marriage itself is not getting any better. But I'm here and I'm happy because I have my child who and that part of the experience, being able to mother him, is what kind of kept me from focusing on the things that were wrong in the marriage, and there just some communication issues. We were in different places spiritually, um, and not, I used to say, I just need somebody that's saved, but what if they just have surface level salvation, and I'm like way past that in my life.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good.
and so there was a whole lot of that. We weren't, we were going to separate churches at first, and then he kept talking about Life Center. And when I talked to my dad, he was like, "Yeah, JD is probably like the best he right." Because I'm like, he don't know nothing about no preaching for real. And he's like, "Yeah, no, Jake, you can." He know what he's talking about with that one. And when we came, it immediately felt like home. He had taken the baby upstairs because he was getting a little noisy. And I looked around at invitation time and didn't see them. And then after service, he asked, and I was like, "Well, I wanted to join, but I didn't want to, go down without you." And then your mom came to see how I enjoyed service. And she's like, "Well, you can still join right now." So we actually joined after church. And I'm thinking, it's going to get better because we'll be, being fed the same things. But after those first two little Sundays, it was me and my baby by ourselves at church. Um, but I mean, I was enjoying that part of it as well, and that's one of the things I tell people I still miss. Like, I love my dad's church. It's home. Like, we have wonderful service every Sunday. But when I can, I watch as much as I can of Life Center before it's time for me to either hop on or physically go to church
Yeah.
at my dad's church here. But yeah, it was just something. It felt like home, and it was very soothing in the midst of what I was going through. But fast forward, I had my baby's first birthday party. Everything is fine. He's never really been sick other than allergies and maybe a cold. Um, there's a Sunday that comes, and my ex husband was gone because he was gone out of town a lot. Um, and I it's really dark, and it starts thundering, and I'm like, you know what? I'm running a little bit behind, and I'm gonna have to get my baby out in this rain. So let me just stream service. I streamed my dad's church service, and I was laying my baby down for a nap and getting ready to go down and cook something. And he was kind of grunting, like maybe he had some gas or something. So, I put him down for a nap. I'm cooking, and I can hear like a grunt and a cough. And I look on the monitor, but I don't really, give it too much thought. He seems to be fine. And then um, I heard him crying a little bit. So I go up, and, he's vomiting, can't keep anything down. And I clean him up, and he starts again. I clean him up again, and he starts again. So I called my mother-in-law, and She came over, we took him to Children's. His dad was not really interested in coming home from out of town. But long story short, we take him to Children's. They do a little something, but they just say it's a virus. It's going to have to run its course. Next morning, he's still not doing well. And by this time, his dad is there. And I had a follow-up appointment with his doctor, but we get him to the children's wing at Ochsner, and they're kind of giving me the same thing. Not really telling me what's wrong, not wanting to give me fluids for him, not really taking any blood samples. And kind of the doctor was very dismissive, almost like to say that I was just being paranoid because I was a first time mom and I wasn't used to that kind of thing. By that night, it was worse. Shift change happens, and the doctor that comes in is livid and is like, he should have been admitted when he got here and all of that. And that was on a Monday morning. Oh, and then, went into Monday night. We got admitted, stayed there. And I could still tell through the night, like, something is just really wrong. And I kept telling them that, and they're like, oh, no, this is normal. It's a virus. It's going to have to run its course. He'll be okay. And I'm like, yeah, I think something is wrong. Up until his final moments, I kept trying to, get a sense of urgency into the doctors, but they just, it wasn't that big of a deal to them. And then around 10 something that Tuesday morning, he was gone. And the PICU doctor told me, don't drop this because you took really good care of him. So medically, this was not supposed to happen. Spiritually, I'm not God. So I can't tell you why this happened from a spiritual aspect, but medically it shouldn't have happened. And when it came down to it, there was some negligence on that first ER doctor who didn't give the fluids. And also when a younger, healthy person, anybody from an infant to someone who's in their 20s gets sick from a virus and it's not treated appropriately, it can turn into something called myocarditis, which just means it travels to the heart, whatever the virus is. And it can be from strep to a stomach virus, the flu, any of those things. So he had acute traces of that in his system. And then there was also his doctor and the PICU doctor were kind of convinced that because he went so long without fluids, by the time he got him, it kind of sent his little body into shock. And so it was tough because I'm there in that hospital room without my parents, who I'm used to being there for everything. I couldn't even get to my dad because he was en route to Atlanta. He was going to preach for Jasper Williams, I believe. And it was just, I couldn't cry. And I'd been in that same conference room because my cousin had gone through a different situation with her son. He was born premature. His lungs never appropriately developed, and he passed away that January prior to the May of Creed passing. And so my aunt came immediately, but she had no idea what she was walking into. She just thought we were still there because he was sick. She had no idea that he was gone. And a few people from my other church in New Orleans, from New Hope, came. A couple of my line sisters. And then it's just more and more people start coming. It was crazy. And I got this feeling, y'all aren't going to make it past this. I kind of dismissed it and I just went with it because I'm like, I don't know where that is coming from. I don't know if that's really the Holy Spirit or whatever, but, and I don't know, it was just the strangest thing that it hit me that we probably wouldn't make it too far past my baby's death. But nonetheless, I went through it because we were still a couple, tried to allow space and opportunity for us to be supportive of each other. But it was already strained and rough, and we got through that. And immediately it went from bad to worse, even with older people kind of trying to talk to us, and pour into him to try to kind of help him through the situation so that, he could, be of support to me. And Even some people like saying like, hey, this can make or break a relationship. So you really need to,
Mm-hmm.
pray and do what you got to do. And it was just rough that we buried the baby the Friday before Mother's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I flew to Texas. He went to Tennessee. Despite some promptings, people telling him he should come, his mom, family members. But that situation, it was what it was. I cannot say that I was a perfect wife or anything, but I
Mm-hmm.
did try to be um, as much of a godly biblical wife as I could be. Um, and I kind of had to realize, and I hung on a lot longer than most people expected. There was one day, I don't even know if a month had passed that the baby had died. I was in my sister's closet. My sister lives across the street from your mom's best friend, but I was in my sister's closet at her house because I did not want the kids to hear me crying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I called her. I called your mom, and I was just telling her, like, I don't know. It was I don't even know what to do anymore in this
Mm-hmm.
marriage. It's rough. If like I try to fix the issues of what he says is wrong on my end, and then it's still like it's something else. So, and I'm trying everything. I've been praying, and she told me I could see something on you when y'all came. I knew it
Mm-hmm.
was something wrong, but I didn't know you that well, and I
Right.
didn't really know how to approach you or say anything. And she prayed with me. We talked, like she was in there. She didn't tell anybody, but I leaned on her a lot, just trying to see, because I'm like, okay, we just lost a baby. Um, there's this outer appearance of him, which in some aspects he's a great guy, great with kids,
Mm-hmm.
really good with doing stuff with kids who are in need in the community, and really looks out for kids, especially those that play sports, tries to mentor, and that kind of thing. But he just wasn't a good partner to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes we have to learn the err in our ways. Like, there were things that I knew I should have waited. I should have consulted God a little bit more in some aspects before getting into that, or getting at so deep so quickly into that relationship. And pray. Now, when I look back on it, I'm very grateful. If I had not had that situation, I wouldn't have had my son.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that experience, even though it was a lot more brief than I anticipated or, would have liked for it to be, that grew me in so many ways. And even,
Mm-hmm.
in his birth and that year with him, and even in his death, like I have grown so much more as a person, as a woman, as a mother, my faith. Like I knew how to pray before, but going through
Right.
that, like hitting the lowest of the low,
Mm-hmm.
um, that kind of, it took me to a deeper place in prayer, in my prayer life. And some people will never be able to handle, even when you realize why something may have happened spiritually, from a spiritual aspect, some other people may not ever be able to handle that. And I think I've lost some, like a friend, because I expressed why I'm very certain some of that had to happen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for where I am now. um, I totally understand why the marriage couldn't continue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because we will forever probably be in two different places spiritually, and there are some places spiritually and some things that what God wants to use me for, that I can't be connected to some people because
Mm-hmm.
they're not in a space where they can grow into the same space that I'm growing into. And so kind of
Absolutely.
that's just where it is, when people, you don't realize how deep being equally yoked is.
Mm. That's
um
good.
I mean, when I was younger, I just felt like, if they saved, and he saved,
Right.
that financially, first priority is paying the tithe or whatever, like, that's, I know he prays every night. I see him do that.
Right.
That's not it. That's not it's so much more to it. And when both aren't able to do the work, you definitely can't withstand a situation like we experienced with the loss of our child.
Yeah,
Um,
and I have heard over and over how difficult it is, even if it's I don't want to say a perfect marriage, but a good marriage,
yeah.
how hard it is to overcome the loss of a child. But let me ask you this, if you don't mind answering. Did your ex husband's response to your son's death have anything to do? Did it contribute to the divorce? And what I mean by that is earlier you mentioned, you didn't really have a lot of help and, he was in and out of town a lot. Was there regret there? You know, what was the response to all
Um,
of this happening?
I think in some instances, yeah, I can remember that the night that everything happened. He cried, telling me about things that he had never had the opportunity to do with our son. And I would always tell him, but I just thought, of course, I didn't think anything would happen to my baby. I would say all the time, "Hey, something's gonna happen, and you're gonna wish you had been here."
Mm.
And yeah, and then life really happened like that. And so, I just after the fact, and even now, like we don't speak or anything because it just got to be too much trying to like be his friend afterwards, and it wasn't like we had a child to continue to raise together or anything like that. But I did tell him like, hey, just be a better parent going forward and be a lot more present than you were then, because that's really all you can do going forward. You can't go back and change anything. But yes, it did contribute. I'm worried about, like, I got to get to this funeral home and make arrangements for a 1 year old and pick out this teeny tiny casket, and
Yes.
you know and he's going to the hospital because we gonna sue. you know Let me get all of this documentation, and I couldn't even think about and process all of that. And I knew, something went really wrong, but I couldn't think about anything that wasn't going to get him back. I just needed to
Sure.
make these arrangements. And then I got to the funeral home, and my dad had to end up doing anything because I couldn't think through and process in those moments. But he didn't show up there. He's, you know, um, yeah. So it was a lot of that. His lack of showing up, and I did try to make leeway because we deal with things very differently.
Sure.
And so my response is not necessarily going to be your response. But when you don't try to create a space for us to be there for each other, however we can, and for us to kind of try to meet each other halfway, like for me, coming back to New Orleans and coming to that house where the only thing that I had there was my baby, that was too much for me.
Sure.
So, the not really wanting to bend, or like, we're staying at your mom's until I can kind of come to grips with things, and then having to hear you complain about it when you weren't the one who was at the house with him all day every day by yourself. So
Right.
it looks different for you. And so I think it was that was some of it, but just realizing that it was never going to be like, at some point I prayed he had come to Texas to visit, because we would just kind of like, I would come there, he would come here. We were trying to figure things out, even though we had already, right before this happened, we had agreed that we were going to move to Texas. But nonetheless, after everything happened, he didn't want to come here anymore. I couldn't take being in New Orleans, so we just tried to kind of make it work however. But something happened. We had an argument, and it was probably about something that was really borderline ridiculous. And I can't remember who said what or anything like that, but I do remember just praying. And I was praying in my prayer journal, just sitting in the bed in my prayer journal. I can remember asking him to be quiet. It's like, hey, I'm praying. I know it doesn't look like it because I'm writing, but I'm
Right.
praying. And just as clear as day, almost, not audible, but I don't know how many of you, I wasn't really in tune with like really hearing God speak to me until I lost my child.
Mm.
But he the spirit just basically spoke to me and said, I've done all I can do.
Wow.
Like he's fine where he is. You're trying to grow, but you cannot do all of this work by yourself. I've done all I can do with this situation, because I believe,
Mm.
God can work anything out. He can
Absolutely.
change anyone, but you have to be willing. He did make us creatures of choice. And if you don't,
Yes.
like, if you're fine with where you are and you don't feel the need to want to do any different, that's just as far as it can go. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just came to the realization, we weren't, this is not, this, yeah, this was not God ordained. Not to say that it can't be for him somewhere else and for me somewhere else, but this was
Mm-hmm.
one of those that, and I don't share this. I share this with my family, and it was pretty recent. The day of my wedding, I don't know what hit me, but when the doors of the church opened, I jerked my dad's hand and he said, "What's wrong?" And I told him nothing. But for
Mm.
whatever reason, I wanted to turn around. And I can't
Wow.
explain it. I don't know why, like, you know, but I didn't say anything. Because I was like, well, what are we gonna do? All of these people are here. People are here from out of
Right.
town. What do there's
Mm-hmm.
this reception that's been paid for. There's one that's gonna be here at the church, and then there's one at a venue. What do I do? And so I just went through with it, probably knowing a little bit better, but thinking,
Mm-hmm.
God can, he'll work all of that stuff out.
Yeah.
Not if that's not what he meant for you to do. And sometimes, like,
Wow.
we want him to hit us over the head with something when there are things that were plainly there to begin with. So, um, my advice would just be, to one, seek God. Make sure you really know what being equally yoked means, because, sometimes God has to do very difficult and devastating things to get you out of situations that he didn't mean for you to be in the first place.
Mm.
So just be prayerful. We get to a certain age and we just want a life partner. We want to we want things to start falling into place, especially when it's happening for other people. But you have to be
Yes.
mindful of where you are and who you are, and how important, like, if faith is your number one thing and it's not for somebody else, it's going to be hard to, when your foundation isn't the same and you don't even have the desire to have the same foundation, and
Right.
to try to grow together, because you're going to grow into two completely different people when your eyes aren't on the
Mm-hmm.
same things. So that's all. I wouldn't, don't want to ever, like, I'm careful with my words, because I don't want to seem like I'm, bashing him or anything like that at all, because at the end of the day, it wasn't meant for us.
Sure.
And it's realizing that, growing. I have grown, and I am grateful for all of the lessons that I learned in it from having that experience of motherhood. And I
Mm-hmm.
look forward to, that real forever person that God has for me. So
Yes. And that is just all around an amazing testimony, because for you to be able to even talk about it, and be able to share that you've grown from it, is in itself shows what kind of person you are, how your parents raised you, and, just how faith truly can and will, if we allow it to, play a part in every area of our lives, even in devastating times. We can
absolutely.
overcome if, we put our faith in God. And God knows, I wish this had been so different. But I am thankful that God brought you into the Life Center family. You will always be a part of us, and we will always love you. This is always your second home, and I'm just glad that we know each other.
Yes, I'm glad. And you know what? I have to say before we go off, like, you don't understand how many times I've been on the opposite end of something happened with this family and
Hmm.
we've got to go and show up for them.
Hmm.
When I got to my house from the hospital, when we pulled up, like, y'all were there. and that still like means the world to me. So yeah, y'all are, I got to, for once, like, somebody else ended up, like, I was on the receiving end of somebody showing up for me. And
Yes.
so I'm forever appreciative of that. And of course, y'all are family, and I can't wait to come and visit. I miss y'all like
Same.
tons.
Once
So
everything gets together,
yes,
you have to come.
yes, definitely.
Yes. So tell people, well, let me ask this first. Is this, is your testimony something that you talk about pretty, or you're open to talking about on different platforms?
I am, and it's also pushed me to, like, I knew not too long after everything happened that one of the purposes in this was for me to try to do grief counseling in some form.
Mm, that's
And I had
good.
put it off because I don't want to go back to counseling school. I don't want to, I'm not interested in like a whole lot of
Hmm.
aspects of counseling, just like grief
Hmm.
and loss mostly.
Okay.
But I will soon be a certified life coach who specializes in
Yes.
grief. And that you don't have a lot of that because they do like, career coaching and
Hmm.
time management. But I'm going to become a life coach who specializes in grief. And that's like really, I just got to take my little test and get my certificate. But yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm doing. I want to help other people navigate, mainly moms who lose young children, but then also I think it's
Hmm.
really important. We don't understand how we grieve relationships. If we've had a job
Yes.
for a long time and we lose that job or we move on, we grieve. You grieve loss, period, and
Hmm.
you go through the same grief cycle just as if you lost a person. So
That's good.
I want to like channel that and use my experience to like be able to help and bless somebody else. So that's what
That
I
is wonderful.
have on the
And I
horizon.
actually said that I was going to grief counseling, and I looked up a couple of places and things, but I haven't made a decision yet. But, I might be with my sister, and that's probably why I haven't made a decision. So you have a client right here.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that. Because as you said, there are so many losses that we experience in life and we don't grieve them appropriately. And
Right.
then we wonder why, different things affect us the way it does. But it's just simply because we haven't dealt with loss throughout our lives, especially African Americans.
Yeah.
We're just finally saying it's cool to go to therapy and to work your stuff
Right.
out. But before it was, I don't need therapy. I got Jesus,
Hmm.
and I'm like, Jesus and therapy is a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you taking your experience and turning it around to help someone else. So tell people how they can find you. If they want you to come and share your story, how do they get in touch with you?
Okay, so on Instagram, I am lady underscore a dot Jeanette, Johnett. I know that's a mouthful. And then um, AJ Glenn 3 at gmail.com is my email address.
Again, AJ, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. Of course, I'm going to have you back, and I'm looking forward to it. But I do appreciate you taking the time tonight to share the very personal story and give advice to those who are going through the same thing.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, that wraps another episode of Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. We have two more episodes of the season, so make sure you are ready to tune in. Next week, we have some more Christian influencers, and they will be telling their stories and sharing their businesses and stuff like that. So make sure you tune in so we can support those doing great things in the kingdom. Thank you for your support. Again, I know I say it often, but I never want to take it for granted. I appreciate everyone who tunes in, everyone who shares, everyone who has been a part of this journey. So come back next week for Churchy Chats with the Church Girl. Same place, same time. Good night.